My name is Alex, and I never imagined I'd be sharing this story. I'm 28 years old now, but I've had a difficult life, particularly when it comes to family. My mother passed away while giving birth to me. Something I never really understood. I never had the chance to know her, but I've heard countless stories from relatives about how much she longed for a child, how she struggled with fertility issues before finally conceiving me. She was so excited to become a mother, and yet she never got to experience that joy because she passed away during childbirth. It's a painful thought that still lingers with me. Growing up, my dad never really moved on from her death. I was raised by him, but it always felt like I was more of a reminder of her absence rather than someone he could connect with. Our house was filled with pictures of her, and everything stayed as it had been before she died. It was as if I was living in a museum of her life. Her clothes still hung in the closet, her books lined the shelves, and every little corner reminded me that I was just a shadow of the woman she had been. The most heartbreaking part was knowing that I would never get to know her, and instead I was left with the hollow feeling of her memory. My dad was physically there, but emotionally he was absent. I didn't know how to reach him. There was no warmth in our relationship. No hugs, no words of encouragement, no love. He did the basic things a parent was supposed to do, making sure I was fed and clothed and sending me off to school. But beyond that, I felt like a stranger in my own home. He rarely spoke to me, and when he did, it was usually to compare me to my cousin Jake. Jake's father, my uncle, had passed away in a car accident when Jake was just 7 years old. After that, my dad took him under his wing. I remember the day we received the news about my uncle's death. It was a rainy Tuesday, and I was sitting at the kitchen table working on homework when the phone rang. My dad answered, and I watched his face crumble. It was the first time I'd ever seen him cry. After he hung up, he just sat there in silence, staring off into space, and I could feel the weight of his sorrow. Soon after, Jake began spending more and more time at our house. At first, I was excited. I thought it would be nice to have another kid around, maybe even help my dad open up a bit. But it didn't take long to realize that Jake's presence only made things worse between my father and me. He was the son my dad had always wanted. Jake was sporty, friendly, and outgoing, while I was shy, introverted, and loved reading. My dad never made it a secret that Jake was the golden child, the one he preferred. I tried everything I could think of to make my dad happy. I joined sports teams, got good grades, and even tried to learn about his interests, but nothing was ever enough. The more I tried, the more I felt invisible. Jake could do no wrong in my dad's eyes, and I could do nothing right. I remember winning a science fair when I was 12, and I was so excited to tell my dad. I had worked so hard on my project, a moving model of the solar system. When I told him, he just nodded and went back to talking to Jake about a football game. It felt like I wasn't even there. As I got older, the comparisons only got worse. I did better than Jake in school, but it didn't matter. My dad would always downplay my accomplishments. When my English teacher praised my essay, my dad just grunted and asked if my grades would help me get a sports grant. It was humiliating. Still, there was a part of me that kept hoping, kept thinking that if I could just find the right key to unlock my dad's affection, maybe things would change. But as the years passed, I realized that the key didn't exist. I wasn't the son my dad had wanted, and I never would be. When it came time for college, I thought for sure my dad would help me out, even if just a little bit. But I was wrong. One day, I overheard him on the phone with Jake, telling him that he was going to pay for his entire college tuition. I was shocked. I had been working hard, doing my best to save up, and yet my dad had chosen Jake again. When I asked my dad if he could help me out, he looked at me like I was insane. "Jake needs it more than you," he said. It was in that moment that I realized the depth of my father's favoritism. Jake was the one who got everything, and I was left struggling to make ends meet on my own. The weight of it all was unbearable. I worked part-time jobs, juggled college and work, but it was never enough. I watched Jake live a life of ease, paid for by my dad, and it broke me. That's when I decided to leave. I packed my things, walked out, and cut off all contact with both my father and Jake. It wasn't easy, but it was the best decision I ever made. I was tired of living in the shadow of my dead mother and the cousin who had replaced me in my father's heart. I couldn't do it anymore. I left home and started over. It was hard. I worked multiple jobs just to survive, but I did it. I found my own way, and over time I built a life for myself. It wasn't the life I had imagined as a kid, but it was mine. It was hard work, sacrifice, and pain, but I came out stronger. And that strength would be tested again when my dad, after years of silence, finally reached out for help. Growing up in the shadow of my father's grief wasn't easy. His fixation on my mother's death shaped our entire relationship, or rather lack of one. From the moment I could comprehend the world around me, I felt the weight of my existence as an unwanted reminder of her absence. My father, though physically present, was emotionally absent, retreating into himself after her passing. As I got older, I became increasingly aware of the strained dynamic between us. He was cold and detached, often distant in both his words and actions. There were no affectionate gestures, no tender moments. He simply went through the motions of being a parent, providing for me physically but offering little else. When he did speak, it was usually to criticize me, to remind me that I wasn't living up to the expectations he had placed on me, expectations that seemed to shift with every passing day. The arrival of my cousin Jake only worsened the situation. Jake's father, my uncle, died when he was 7, and my father took it upon himself to care for him, to provide the love and guidance that Jake had lost. I understood that. I really did. But in the process, I was pushed further into the background. Jake was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. He was athletic, outgoing, and charming. He seemed to have all the qualities my father valued in a person, and I felt like a disappointment in comparison. It wasn't just that Jake got more attention than me. It was the way my father would criticize me in front of him, as if to highlight the differences between us. "Why can't you be more like Jake?" he would say, making me feel small and insignificant. I worked hard to please my father, doing everything I could to meet his expectations, but it was never enough. I won awards, I excelled in school, but my father never acknowledged my achievements. Instead, he would boast about Jake's latest accomplishments, his sports victories, or his charm. Jake didn't help the situation either. He was aware of the favoritism and he reveled in it. He was the center of attention at family gatherings, and I, always the quiet one, was pushed aside. I tried to be part of the family, but it felt like I was always on the outside looking in. The tipping point came when I decided to go to college. I was determined to make something of myself, to escape the shadow of my father's neglect. But when it came time for financial support, I was shocked to learn that my father had chosen Jake over me once again. He paid for Jake's entire college tuition without hesitation. I couldn't even get him to help with my books. I asked him, naively, if he could assist me with my tuition, but his response was cold. "Jake needs it more than you," he said, as if my education didn't matter. I was crushed. I had worked hard for everything I had ever achieved, but none of it mattered to my father. In that moment, I realized that I had no place in his life, that I would never be the son he wanted. I was just the son he had, and he didn't know how to love me. I began working multiple jobs to fund my education, but it wasn't enough. The strain was unbearable. I tried my best, but eventually I had to drop out of college. Watching Jake live the life I had always dreamed of, funded entirely by my father, felt like a betrayal. The final straw came when I decided to cut off all contact with my family. I couldn't take it anymore. The decision to cut ties with my family was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was necessary. The years of neglect, favoritism, and emotional abuse had finally reached a breaking point. I packed my belongings and left home, seeking a fresh start somewhere far away from the toxic environment I had known all my life. I didn't have a plan or any clear idea of what the future would hold, but I was determined to create my own path. I moved into a small apartment, barely able to afford the rent. I found work wherever I could, waiting tables, working in construction, even pulling late-night shifts at a gas station. Life was tough. I was constantly exhausted, barely scraping by, but I knew I had to keep pushing forward. Every day was a battle, but I was proud of myself for surviving it. There were no safety nets, no financial help from my family, and no emotional support. It was just me and my determination. Over the next few years, I started building a life of my own, piece by piece. I found a steady job as a manager at a local bookstore. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and it gave me a sense of purpose. I also enrolled in night classes at a community college, working toward the degree I had always wanted. It wasn't easy. Balancing work and school was challenging, but it was mine. It was the life I had worked for, the life I had built on my own terms, and I was proud of it. Along the way, I found friends who genuinely cared about me. They became my chosen family. We had weekly game nights, camping trips when we could afford them, and we supported each other through thick and thin. These relationships were different from anything I had experienced with my blood relatives. They accepted me for who I was, not for what they wanted me to be. But even with all the progress I had made, I couldn't fully escape the past. The memories of my father's neglect and the years of favoritism still lingered in the back of my mind. I would see Jake's updates on social media, his fancy college dorms, his spring break trips, the new gadgets my father bought for him, and it still stung. I wondered if things could have been different if my father had chosen to invest in me the way he did in Jake. Maybe I could have had the college experience I had always dreamed of. But that was in the past and I couldn't change it. I had come to accept that my family would never understand me. They would never value me the way I deserved to be valued. And as hard as it was to admit, I had to stop seeking their approval. They weren't the ones who had to live with the consequences of their actions. I had spent so many years trying to earn their love, and it had always been in vain. But now I had finally started to build a life for myself, one where I didn't need their validation. As time went on, I felt more and more at peace with the life I had built. Sure, it wasn't easy and it wasn't the life I had dreamed of as a child, but it was mine. It was real. I wasn't depending on anyone anymore. There was a sense of liberation in that, a freedom that I hadn't realized I needed until it was finally in my grasp. I continued to work at the bookstore and I could feel myself growing. Slowly but surely, I began to gain confidence in myself. Every challenge I faced, I overcame. Every rejection, every failure just made me stronger. I found solace in the pages of books, in the quiet of the bookstore, and in the friendships I had nurtured along the way. My chosen family had become my foundation, and I no longer felt like I was on my own in this world. But the past still had a way of creeping up on me. A year ago, I had thought I was finally free of the emotional baggage my father had left me with. However, that all changed one afternoon when I received a phone call that I wasn't expecting. It was my dad. I had cut him off years ago and I hadn't heard from him in nearly 3 years. The number on my phone screen was unfamiliar, and for a moment I thought about ignoring it, but something made me answer. His voice was strange. It was soft, almost pleading. He was asking how I was doing as if nothing had happened. There was an awkwardness in the conversation that felt like he was trying to pretend everything was normal. But it wasn't. It couldn't be. The years of hurt and rejection had created a wall between us, one that couldn't simply be torn down with a phone call. When I asked why he was calling after all this time, he hesitated. Then he got to the point: he needed money. A lot of it. My stomach dropped as I heard those words. I couldn't believe it. This was the same man who had turned his back on me for years, the same man who had chosen to fund my cousin's future while leaving me to fend for myself. And now he was asking for my help? I was shocked, to say the least. I had never expected this. There was no apology for the years of favoritism, no remorse for the pain he had caused. Just a simple demand. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. The man who had made me feel like I was never enough, who had constantly belittled me and made me feel invisible, was now asking for my help. I couldn't just let it go. I had to ask, what about Jake? Shouldn't he be the one to help you out? You've always favored him. My voice was shaky, but I knew I had to speak my truth. My dad paused on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, he explained that Jake was busy and didn't have the means to help right now. That, more than anything, sent a jolt of frustration through me. Here I was, the person who had always been overlooked and undervalued, being asked to step in. I couldn't help but laugh, though it wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was more like a bitter laugh, one of disbelief. You've always made it clear that Jake was your favorite, that he deserved everything more than I did. And now you want me to help you? I shook my head, anger bubbling inside me. I didn't offer him any money. I didn't even offer him a shred of empathy. I made it clear that he needed to go to Jake for help, since he had always been the golden child, the one who got all the opportunities. I ended the call shortly after that, feeling a strange sense of relief. For the first time, I wasn't trying to earn my father's approval. I wasn't the kid desperately trying to get his love and attention. I had learned that I didn't need him. I had built my own life, and I wasn't going to let him walk back into it after all these years. The days after my conversation with my father were quiet, but my mind was anything but. I spent the next several weeks reflecting on everything I had been through, trying to make sense of the years I'd spent chasing a relationship with a man who had never been emotionally available. I thought about my childhood, about the constant comparison to Jake, about the rejection I had endured, and how none of it had ever been my fault. It was hard to admit to myself, but I had spent far too long trying to make something work that was never meant to be. Even though I had cut ties with my father, the emotional weight of the situation continued to linger. I had been working hard to distance myself from that toxic dynamic, but there were days when I wondered if it was the right choice. Would I regret this decision later? Was I being too harsh? But deep down, I knew I wasn't being harsh enough. The truth was, I had already given my dad more chances than he deserved, and every time he had let me down. But then something happened that gave me the final push I needed. A few weeks after the call, I received a message from Jake. I had no idea how he got my number, but I recognized the tone of the message immediately. He was upset. He wanted to talk. I debated whether to respond. I had no interest in rekindling a relationship with him. He had been the favorite for so long and nothing had changed. Yet, something made me feel obligated to at least hear him out. We arranged to meet at a nearby cafe. When I arrived, I saw Jake sitting at a table near the window, looking unusually nervous. He had always been confident, outgoing, the life of the party. But today there was none of that in him. He looked almost vulnerable. I took a deep breath and walked over to him. "Hey," I said, sitting down across from him. He didn't say anything right away, as if he was gathering his thoughts. "Michelle," he finally spoke, his voice low. "I know things between us have been tense. But I need you to know something." I raised an eyebrow. This wasn't the Jake I knew. He wasn't the one to get emotional. But something in his tone made me listen. "I've messed up," he continued, "and I know I've hurt you. I know how much Dad favored me, and I was blind to how much that hurt you. I wasn't there when you needed me. And I'm sorry. I didn't see it. I wasn't sure what to say." This wasn't the apology I expected from him. I had always felt like the black sheep, the one who didn't matter, but now, sitting here across from him, I realized that he had his own burdens too. "Jake, it's not just about Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's about how I've been treated all my life. I've spent years feeling invisible, like I don't matter. I never asked for much, but you and Dad made me feel like I wasn't enough." He nodded, his eyes filled with regret. "I understand now," he said quietly. "I've been an idiot. I can't undo what happened, but I want to make it right. I want to help you." I looked at him, seeing him in a way I hadn't before. He was offering me something I hadn't expected, an olive branch. But could I trust him? Could I trust that he truly meant it, or was this just another attempt to smooth things over for his own peace of mind? "I'm not sure what making it right means," I replied, my voice filled with uncertainty. "But I can't go back to how things were. I've moved on." Jake sat back, a hint of sadness in his expression. "I understand. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I sat there for a long moment, letting his words sink in. For the first time, I felt like I had the space to make a decision without the weight of my father's expectations or Jake's comparisons. "Thanks for the apology, Jake," I said, finally standing up. "But I'm moving forward. I've built a life for myself, and I'm not going to let anyone drag me back into the past." As I walked away, I realized something important. I had spent so much time holding on to resentment and anger, but I didn't need to anymore. Letting go of the past wasn't about forgiving everyone, it was about freeing myself from their control over my life. A few weeks passed after my conversation with Jake, and I found myself feeling lighter, more at peace than I had in years. Despite the heavy burden of the past, I was slowly beginning to rebuild my life. I had a stable job now as a bookstore manager, which provided me with financial independence. While it wasn't the career I had initially envisioned, it was something I was proud of. Each day I felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing I had worked hard for everything I had. I was also enrolled in night classes at the local community college, still chasing the dream of earning a degree, even if it took longer than I had originally planned. My classmates were kind and supportive, and I was slowly beginning to feel like I was part of something. A group of people who appreciated me for who I was, not for who they wanted me to be. My social anxiety, which had been a lifelong struggle, was starting to ease, though it wasn't gone entirely. I was working on it one day at a time. My friends, the ones I had made after cutting ties with my family, had become my support system. They weren't perfect, but they accepted me without judgment. We had weekly game nights, camping trips, and dinners where we just enjoyed each other's company. I never had to prove myself to them. It felt like real family, a chosen family that cared about me without any ulterior motives. But then one day I got a call that I didn't expect. My phone rang, and when I saw the name on the screen, I froze. It was my father. After years of silence, I hadn't expected to hear from him again, let alone get a call asking for help. I wasn't sure what to think. Should I be angry? Should I feel sympathy? Should I even answer? I hesitated, but in the end I decided to pick up. His voice on the other end of the line sounded different. Older, more tired, almost broken. "Michelle," he said, his voice soft. "I know it's been a long time, but I need to talk to you. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I want to apologize." I didn't know how to respond. My first instinct was to hang up and walk away from it all. But something inside me made me listen. After all, this was the man who had ignored me, rejected me, and let me fend for myself all these years. "Why now? What do you want, Dad?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. "Why are you calling me after all this time?" "I'm in trouble," he admitted, his voice shaking slightly. "I've made some bad financial decisions, and I'm in deep. I need your help, Michelle." The irony of it all hit me like a punch in the gut. This was the man who had never helped me when I needed him most, and now he was calling me asking for my help. After all the years of neglect, after choosing Jake over me, he was turning to me for assistance. For a brief moment, I felt a flicker of anger. But then I remembered what I had worked so hard to achieve. I had made it on my own. I didn't need to rely on anyone, especially not him. And I certainly didn't owe him anything after everything he had put me through. "Why don't you go to Jake?" I asked, the words coming out before I could stop them. "You've always chosen him over me. He should be the one to help you." There was silence on the other end. My father didn't respond at first. When he finally spoke, his voice was strained. "Jake's not available," he said softly. "He's busy with his job and he's not in a position to help right now. Please, Michelle, I know I've made mistakes, but I'm asking for your help." I took a deep breath. Part of me felt sorry for him, he was my father after all. But most of me was tired of being the person who had to fix everything. I had spent so long trying to earn his approval, and now I realized that was never going to happen. He had made his choices and they had led him here. "I'm sorry, Dad," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "But I can't help you. I've been trying to help myself for years. It's your turn to deal with the consequences of your actions." There was a long pause, and then he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry for everything. I was wrong. I didn't know how to respond to that." What was the point of words now? He had never been there when I needed him, and even now, his apology didn't change anything. I couldn't let him back into my life. Not like this. "I hope you figure it out, Dad," I said, my voice more final than I intended. "Goodbye." I hung up the phone, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. It was over. The years of wondering, the years of seeking validation, the years of trying to please him, it was all over. I had finally stood up for myself. The days that followed were quiet. I didn't hear from him again. I didn't need to. I had made my decision and it felt like the right one. It wasn't about revenge or holding grudges. It was about protecting my peace and moving forward. And that's exactly what I did. I continued my classes, focused on my work, and deepened my relationships with the people who truly cared about me. I realized that my life wasn't defined by the family I was born into. It was defined by the choices I made and the people I surrounded myself with. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. The key message of this story is about self-empowerment and recognizing the importance of setting boundaries, even with family. Life often presents us with difficult relationships, particularly within families, where we might feel unappreciated or overlooked. The story teaches us that we don't have to accept mistreatment or neglect, no matter the source. It's important to prioritize our own well-being, make decisions that align with our values, and understand that seeking approval from those who have hurt us may never lead to the validation we need. True strength comes from acknowledging our worth and standing up for ourselves, even when it feels uncomfortable or difficult. This lesson can resonate deeply for the elderly, as it emphasizes the importance of self-respect and the need to take control of one's own life, regardless of age. It's never too late to redefine the relationships that shape us, choose our peace, and take steps toward healing. The message is clear. Sometimes the healthiest decision is to distance yourself from toxic environments, no matter how close the individuals may be. It is about reclaiming your power, finding fulfillment in your own journey, and embracing the support of those who truly understand and appreciate you. Ultimately, it's a reminder that we all deserve respect, love, and understanding, and that the best time to start living authentically is now. Thank you so much for watching. If this story resonated with you or helped you gain some insight, go ahead and drop a 1 in the comments to let me know you got value from the video. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss out on more real-life stories that can inspire and guide you. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who could benefit from hearing it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Share your feelings in the comments below. Remember, we're all in this together, and sometimes just hearing someone else's experience can help us find our own path forward. Thanks again for being here, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.